So this is our schedule for today. The primary focus of today is the scale kit. So we're going to be looking at what is a scale kit. We'll take a look at the parts. So if you do order the scale kit, what can you expect to see? We'll take a look at the online course and the extra content that is currently available. And then we'll take a look at some of the project ideas. To get started, what is the scale kit? So as we can see here, the idea behind this kit is that students can have this on their desktop. They can use it to weigh objects. They could also use it to measure forces. So it looks like this. So I have it on my desk here. So it's about, let's try to get that into view here. So it's about 6 inches by 6 inches. And it comes totally pre-assembled. This kit specifically can measure up to 55 pounds or 25 kilograms, which is actually quite nice for the size of it. And just like all of our other kits that you're used to, Windows, Mac OS, Raspberry Pi, those are all supported operating systems. And you can code against it in Python, Java, C#, and Swift. And then as I was mentioning earlier to Amanda, we will be getting web USB support very shortly in the next couple of months here. So you will be able to use this kit through a browser in the next couple of months, and you'll be able to code against it with literally with Scratch blocks, with MakeCode blocks, or with JavaScript and MakeCode. So that'll be pretty cool. So taking a look at the parts of the scale kit. So as I mentioned, it comes totally with this totally pre-assembled scale here. So when you do receive it, there's a 5 kilogram load cell that comes kind of pre-installed here. So if you're not familiar with load cells, we'll talk about that in a little bit here. But that comes inside of the scale. You get your whole scale here. You get this fidget down here, which is called a Wheatstone bridge fidget. So we'll talk about that in the next slide. But you get some extra load cells, and those are basically varying capacities. And then you get your Allen key, your screwdriver, and your cable. So that's kind of what the basic kit looks like. And then taking a little bit of a deeper dive. So Wheatstone bridge fidget. This is a slightly technical sounding name, but essentially what this sensor allows you to do is it allows you to connect to a Wheatstone style sensor. So that doesn't really mean a lot, but essentially a load cell, if you have not seen one before, it looks something like this. Hopefully you're able to see that. So we'll have a picture of it in the next slide, but this is a Wheatstone style sensor. And if you're familiar with circuits or with electronics, you'll potentially have heard of a Wheatstone bridge. But again, it's not super important for computer science or for high school students. But essentially what this sensor does is it makes it really, really easy to read the output of a load cell. So it's just a really nice and easy way to connect to a load cell. So load cells, this is what they look like. If you're not familiar with load cells, this is kind of one type of load cell. So there's tons of different types of load cells, but this is a very basic load cell that you have probably encountered in your life. So your students may be like, well, I've never seen a load cell. But if you were to take apart your kitchen scale in your house, if you have an electronic kitchen scale, if you were to take apart your bathroom scale in your house, those would both be things that are using a load cell. So we have a picture here. You can see here, this is like your standard kitchen scale, and inside of the kitchen scale, we see the same type of load cell that comes in this kit. So essentially they're force sensing modules. I don't want to go too in depth today, but essentially what the kind of key component of a load cell is something called a strain gauge. And a strain gauge is basically a resistor that changes its resistance based on the amount of force applied. So that's essentially what's happening is this thing will actually have 4 strain gauges kind of adhered to it. So if you have the load cell with you, you'll notice that there's some kind of white adhesive material. So that is actually where the load cell, or the strain gauge, sorry, is adhered to the load cell. And then when that load cell bends, that strain gauge also bends and it changes its resistance. And then our Wheatstone bridge fidget picks up that really, really, really small change, amplifies it, and then converts it to a digital signal. So again, this is all stuff that is not required at all to use it. But if you do have students who are interested, it's definitely an interesting topic, especially because load cells are so widely used. So definitely something that they could have some fun looking into. I guess the last point here is that your scale will come with 3 different types of load cells. So as I mentioned, when you kind of receive this one, there'll be a 5 kilogram load cell that's already kind of pre-attached and ready to go. You'll also have 2 other ones. So you'll have one that says 25 kilograms on it and one that says 780 grams. So depending on what you want to measure, you can kind of select the one that works best for you. But that's kind of the basic thing. So you get 3 load cells and they basically allow you to measure forces, which allows you to calculate weights. Alrighty. The last kind of major component that you'll receive is the scale assembly again. Again, it's about 6 inches by 6 inches. It's made of aluminum, so you shouldn't have any issues with any rusting or corrosion. That is our kit. So you have the scale, you have the Wheatstone bridge, load cells, and then all the stuff that you need to work with it. So pretty basic stuff there. So just like we have with all of our other kits, we have created the fully online course. So we're going to take a look at that now. And if you're following along, you can click the link in the slide and that will bring you to the online course. If you're on the website, you can use the Learn tab up here. So there's that Learn button up here. You can go down to Projects. So Learn Projects, and that will take you to our projects page here. And then if you scroll down, you'll see the scale kit right here. So that is another way that you could navigate to the scale kit. So what we have is we have kind of 2 primary projects at the moment. So we have this scale kit one right here, which is where you learn to use your scale kit. And then we have our extension down here. So this one will take a Raspberry Pi. So if you have a Raspberry Pi, this is where you would use that. Fidgets work really well with the Raspberry Pi. So that's kind of a natural fit there. But for right now, we're going to take a look at this scale kit here. So this is the project. Again, the look and the feel will be what you're used to with the Getting Started kit. We have the navigation here on the left-hand side, and we have kind of the objectives here in the GIF. So as you can see here, at the end of this project, students should have a scale that is connected to their computer that can measure weight. So here, there's a 20-gram weight that is applied to the scale, and the output from the program is, hey, this is a 20-gram weight. So the kind of things that they're going to be learning is how to use the Wheatstone bridge. So what the code actually looks like to get that voltage value and to convert it into weight. You'll learn how to calibrate your scale. So this is not necessary, but it is definitely a nice thing to do, especially if you are, if you're planning to use this in maybe you want to create the scale in your computer science class and use it in a chemistry class to measure things for your experiments. It's definitely nice to have to get it as accurate as you want, or as you can, I guess, which is nice. And then we'll also just talk about how you can actually connect those different load cells in here. So just like usual, we're going to use the navigation to go to the next page. So here's all those parts that we mentioned that we just talked about. The only thing to note is the hub is not included in the scale kit. So if you purchase the scale kit, you'll take your hub that comes in your Getting Started kit, and that's what you'll use in the scale kit. So definitely would recommend running through this with your students first, the Getting Started kit. That's kind of like the prerequisite to using the scale kit. So moving on to the assembly step, as I mentioned, there's not too much assembly with this kit. So you'll take this out of the box. It's all ready to go. Students just have to connect, there's 4 wires, and that's all they have to do is just connect that to their bridge. So there's a table here that shows them the connections. And if I guess the only thing to note here is if they don't have it connected to port 0, so you can see there's a 0 here and there's 1 here. If their code isn't working, check to make sure they actually have it on port 0 or on the kind of, the 0 section. And the other thing to note is just if their code's not working, they may have not connected these properly, or, it's not a great connection that they've made. So that's the things I would check. But after they connect their sensor cable here to the Wheatstone bridge and they connect to the hub, that's all there is to do. They're done. They can start coding. So it's really nice, really, really quick and easy to get it going. So once they have that connected, the first step that they're going to have to do is to get the scale offset. So I'm going to run through this now. Essentially, we provide code just like we always do. You can change your code to Java, C#, Swift, whatever you'd like. But I'm going to copy this code here, and I'm going to be using Thonny today. So this is Thonny. I'm just going to clear out my old program. I'll paste in that new one, and then I'll just quickly review what is actually happening in this code in case you're not familiar with the code yet. So essentially in Python, we always have our import statements. So we're always going to be importing that fidget class. And then today, the Wheatstone bridge fidget uses the voltage ratio input class. So this is the class that you need to use with the bridge. So here we're creating an object called scale that is now referencing that class from up here. And then just like always, we're opening that scale so that we can start using it. When we start using it, this is the command that we're going to be using. It's similar in Java. It should be like get voltage ratio in Java as well. And essentially, this is just getting us the voltage that the sensor is measuring. So what we're doing in this step here is we're getting the offset value. And essentially, this is like the base value. So I'll try to put this in. Hopefully, you guys are able to see my scale. But this is what kind of like the base value that the scale is reading. So if I ran this, for example, we have this value here. So it's a very, very small value because what's happening is it's essentially, there's a load cell inside of here, and it's essentially measuring that top plate right now and like the bolts and whatever else is on there. And what we want to do, the purpose of this is we want to be able to subtract this value from future values so that we can zero it out. So that's the first step here. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy one of these values here. They're all very similar. So we're just going to take one of them and we're just going to put that into Notepad for now. So I'm just opening up a Notepad, pasting that there, and then we're going to come back to that in the next section. So in the course itself, there's kind of some examples and explanation here for students. So as usual, there's that, but you can see here, the main point of this is to collect that scale offset. So we've collected that, we can move on to the next step. So the next step here is calculating your weight. So now that you have this voltage ratio and you have the offset, how do we actually get weight from this, right? So this step here, again, we have our base code. And essentially, I'll copy this code into my project. So I'll copy this in like that. And then I'll just take a look at what's changed here. So everything is basically the same. The only difference is we now have this offset value variable. And this is where we insert that value that we had taken. So we'll do that now. So we had this value here, and you can actually just copy and paste this right in. Python is happy to take the e to the -5, and same with Java, that should all be fine. So you can just copy paste it right in. And then we can see here, there's a little formula. And essentially what's happening is we're saying scale, get voltage ratio. So we're getting that voltage ratio. We're subtracting the offset because we want to take off that top plate and whatever else is kind of on there by default. And then we're multiplying it by this value here. So this is an estimated value, which basically converts your voltage ratio to kilograms. So this would have units basically of kilograms per voltage ratio like that. If you were to look at the units, so when you multiply it by voltage ratio, you get kilograms out. So this is a kind of value that we provide by default, but you can actually calculate this yourself. This is basically found experimentally, and you can do that yourself, and we do that in the next step. But if you aren't able to calculate it, you can just use these, and it's a pretty good. You can use this, and it's a pretty good estimate. So now what we have is we have this weight value that is in kilograms. So when I run my code now, I should have 0. So you can see my scale is now reading 0 because there's nothing on the scale. And then if I have that 20 gram, this little 20 gram weight here, so pretty small. But if I put that on the scale here, we should see, we're seeing basically exactly 20 grams here. So that, and I can actually, I'll punch out another decimal there so we can see the real value. So we can see it's about 19.6 grams, which is pretty good. So that's just using that estimated value of 4,700. So pretty good already with that. But if you do want to get more accurate, that's where the next step comes in. But as you can see here, so basically with just a few lines of code, so I'm opening the scale, I'm creating the scale, opening it, and I calculated this offset value. So basically with those few things, I now have a scale on my desk that is measuring weight. So it's pretty cool how fast that is and how easy it is. So moving on, see we have these definitions here about what is 4,700 for students. So they can take a look at that. The practice problems as we normally have. So here they're talking about unit conversion. And then there's also a section here about calculating your offset automatically. So just again, a few things for students who are kind of interested in taking it to the next level there. But the next step here talks about calibrating your scale. So again, this is basically going to give us a different value than that 4,700. And how you calibrate it is you would actually use you try to find a real scale that is maybe like maybe you might have a higher accuracy scale in one of your labs. But the idea is that if you take a scale, measure a weight, and then you use that to calibrate this scale, that's one of the best ways you can do that. So we have recommended weights here. So depending on your load cell that you're using, you're going to have to find the value for each load cell. So for example, today I have a 5 kilogram load cell that's on my scale. So ideally, I would have, about a 2.5 kilogram weight, so something about mid-range. But in reality, anything is really okay. It's better if you go a little bit heavier, but today I'm just going to use that 20 gram weight, for example, just to see what the value looks like. So we have the formulas here. Again, this is, the accuracy thing is not necessarily required, but if you do have a student who wants to kind of, take it to that next level, this is a cool way to show them how to do that. And we actually do have a piece of code here that just does this automatically for you. So I'm going to copy that code. I'm going to actually put this in a new file here. So this is the code that basically will calibrate your scale. So I'm just going to run this. I'll save it. And what this will do is it'll just ask you, it'll have a little prompt here. So we see this prompt here. It says, make sure nothing is on your scale and press enter. So I'll remove my weight here. I'll press enter. That will basically calculate the offset value. So that value that we had earlier. And then I'll put a known weight on the scale. So I'm going to take that 20 gram weight again. I'll put that on the scale. I'll try to center it. And I'll say, okay, that is a 20 gram weight. And it wants it in kilograms. So 0.02. I'll press enter there. And that will calculate my new slope value. So my new slope here is 49.85. So you can see that it's close to that 4,700, just slightly off. So then I could then put this in here, use that, and that will give me a more accurate weight measurement. So that is, so if I run this, for example, now I could do something like, let's try measuring my phone. So I have my phone, for example, you could throw that on there, you can measure that. It's about 199, 200 grams, which you can look up your weights online and make sure that that's accurate, which it pretty much is. So that is those steps there. The last step of this course is changing your scale capacity. So this just shows students kind of with the step-by-step instructions, how they can remove the plate and just swap in the new load cell. So pretty easy. This is what it looks like on the inside. So you just have the load cell there. You have the top plate. There's only four screws that go in it. And then you can swap out to the 780 gram or the 25 kilogram load cell. And when you do that, there's a table here now that will tell you the estimated values. So if you don't have a scale at your school, you can just use these estimated values in your program to get your weight. So that is the basic kind of first project for the scale. And that basically gets you up and running with your scale, gets weight kind of measured out. And that's that. The next step that we have here, if you are a school who uses Raspberry Pis, or if you have a student who again kind of wants to take it to the next level, maybe has some time, they can do this. So the idea is that you're using a Raspberry Pi, so you can use any Raspberry Pi. We have the basic one here. This is like the Raspberry Pi 4, or you could even use a 0. So the 0 is the very small one. So you could use something like that. Connect your scale to that. Connect your LCD so that you can output the weight, and then you could have a little system here that's measuring weight. So again, you could have this maybe coded up in the computer science class and then take this to the science class to actually be used. And it's actually quite a good scale. So it's like fairly accurate. So it's a nice one to use. So as usual, all the code is here. This is what the code looks like when you have it out there. So they have this little diagram and they have their weight, and all the instructions for them are on that page. So that is the basic kind of scale kit and the extension. There's plans. So we do have more extensions coming for the scale kit and the plant kit. So if you do have a plant kit in your classroom, check back for those, but those are in the works. And just to show, we're coming up on half an hour here, but just to show some project ideas. So like, what can I actually do with this scale? We've had, as I mentioned, we've had a lot of interesting stuff come out of this. So of course you can just code it up and have a basic scale, just outputting weight. Maybe they could implement some different functionality using the getting started kit. So maybe again, the red button could be zeroing it. The green button could cycle through different units. So you could have ounces, you could have grams, you know, all that. So that's an idea if you just want to kind of keep it simple. Taking it to the next level is definitely an IoT scale. So we have a project on our, here, I'll go here. So if you go to the projects tab here, you may have noticed that there's this new Instructables button down here. So this will take you to an Instructables page that is basically a collection of Fidgets projects. So it's advanced. So maybe if you're in the grade 12, kind of maybe grade 11 advanced range, you could do something like this, which is again using a Raspberry Pi, but it's essentially creating this Internet of Things scale, where in this situation it's monitoring a plant. So it's using actually the moisture sensor from our plant kit. So there you can see the Raspberry Pi, the hub, and the Wheatstone Bridge Fidget. And essentially what this is doing is measuring the weight of the plant, because it should, after you water it, it'll go up and then it should go down as the water evaporates. It's another way to indicate when a plant needs watering, which is actually pretty cool. So this one, for example, we have any kind of monitoring in general is pretty fun. So plants we saw, another one that we had seen in the past is pet food and pet water. So you could have if you're in a computer science class and you're looking for kind of end of term projects, that could be something where maybe you have a Raspberry Pi and it sends out a text message when the food's low or something like that. Physics, of course, you could also use this for force measurements for those bridge projects, anything like that. You can use this with, and there's just been a lot of kind of creative uses that we hadn't thought of before. So we actually posted this Indiana Jones one in our newsletter that just went out. But we had a class who basically used this and recreated that Indiana Jones thing where he grabs the treasure and tries to replace it with the bag. So they had a timer that was going, and if you didn't replace the weight in a quick enough time, you'd lose. So that is our time for today. I'm going to stick around for more questions, but the idea today was just to introduce everybody to the scale kit, get a feel for it. If you have questions, I'm going to stick around definitely. But we do appreciate everybody stopping by. And if you do want to get in touch with us, these are our best contact information here. So education@fidgets.com and fidgetsedu at Twitter.